So if you buy a company older than 5 years old, and it's been profitable the last 5 years, you have a 93% success rate 5 years later with that same business. Right. You're still at 93%. Now, take it from a startup, within the first 5 years, it's a 92% failure rate of every startup.
I was going to say, it's like literally the inverse.
It is.
Yo. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, the best entrepreneurship podcast. Being an entrepreneur is hard. That is why we created findyourfreedompod.com to compile all the resources you need to find your own freedom. And be sure to join our newsletter for tips and tools for aspiring entrepreneurs and to connect with our huge network of entrepreneurs. Today, we welcome on Ben Kelly. Super stoked to have you on with us today, Ben.
Yeah, I'm super stoked to be with you guys today and talk through, and looking forward to getting to know you more.
Ben, we were introduced to you by Mr. Passive, who was on with us a few episodes ago. Can you tell us a little bit how you guys met and sort of what you guys are doing together now?
Yeah, so me and Mr. Passive have been friends now for probably over a year. We first met on Twitter, which is actually or I should say X now, not Twitter anymore.
That's right.
And yeah, that's right. The Twitter is he who shall not be named. And so, yeah, I met Mr. Passive on there. And he is in the vending machine space, and he convinced me back then. He was like, "Hey, this is a great, And so I actually got a vending machine because of Mr. Passive. I actually did well with it, and so since then we've been friends, and we've done a couple different business deals together, and we're working together on one right now. So yeah, we've been with each other for like the last year.
It's so funny how much of our audience, when we have people comment or resource or send us messages, how many people are just shocked how many connections happen on Twitter. I think it's such an underused resource. What's your take on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it all starts with the vending machines, man. It always comes back around to those vending machines.
It does.
He sent us over your info and we were looking through your diverse groups of things. Can you kind of give our audience a quick little intro on what you're focused on right now?
Yeah, so there's pretty much two things that I focus on right now. So the first thing is Acquisition Ace, which is my private coaching community for people that want to learn how to acquire a six-figure cash flowing business. And we go through how to source those deals. We actually source for our members. We then go into the analysis phase of teaching them how to analyze deals and how to know a good deal from a bad deal. And then when we get to the funding part, we help with kind of three ways in which we help them fund their deals. We have private investor network. We actually obviously have financial institutions and banks that we have relationships with. And then also myself and some other partners would fund the deals that we find acceptable and that everyone agrees on. So it's kind of a one-stop shop to try to acquire a cash flowing business in 6 months is the goal.
Where did you learn how to do that? The first thing coming to my mind is like, this guy looks young compared to me. Where did he learn how to do all these things so early in his life?
Yeah, so my story kind of out of college, I was an Army intelligence officer for 6 years. And when I got out, I went to JP Morgan. And so at JP Morgan, I was in their private bank. And so in the private bank, what the part of that bank is for people that have over $10 million or more in liquid net worth. And JP Morgan would go out, they bring them to the bank and they manage their funds, right? And so my job was to build these relationships and manage the money that came in. And so when we brought people in, we get to know them pretty well and we know how they build their wealth. And a lot of the people that came into the bank, especially over the $10 million in liquid net worth, were acquiring businesses to grow their wealth. And so I saw kind of firsthand, I didn't have any idea about it until I started seeing some of my clients literally doubling or tripling their net worth in a single year through acquiring businesses in their portfolio. And so I was like, man, and they're back then they were acquiring, businesses that are $50, $100 million. So for me, obviously, I didn't start that way. I started out very small, but the same idea and the same strategy that they were using, I said, well, why can't I start this, but on a much more manageable basis? And that's what got me going down the rabbit hole, reading books, watching YouTube, and just banging my head against the wall for 18 months to get my first deal done. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I love that you said that. So everyone, when you're out there, you have something that you think that you see other people doing, and you're like, that looks like a really cool concept. I'm going to go try that. Don't expect 1 month of work to get you to that deal. Yeah, it's nice to hear that 18 months thing. Doug and I have equal entrepreneurial stories starting out. It's just rough as fuck for like over a year. Just expect it to be, you're literally smashing your head against the wall, like dreading what you're going to have to do every day, waking up for a while, because it's, it takes a long time to figure it out. And as you're saying this, I'm thinking, all right, so you're going out looking for businesses to buy the businesses. Not a lot of people have capital to just go acquire businesses like that. So can you kind of talk our audience through how this concept kind of feels like it's out of reach, but it might not really be out of reach?
Oh yeah, totally. So, and I agree with you. Most people think when they think of cash flowing assets, they obviously think of real estate, which is a great way of doing it. Most people are familiar with you can get a loan to buy a house and what that looks like and how much you have to put down. But teaching them that there is just as good incentives, if not better, when it comes to businesses, kind of shocks people. And so people think they have to have millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy a business. And there's a couple different ways we teach in my group in order to do this. When you have, let's just say, the average person, let's say, has $20,000 in investable capital, right, that they've saved over the last, let's say, a couple of years. And so there's something called the SBA, Small Business Administration. And what it is it's just like on real estate when you have like a VA loan or an FHA loan. The government provides these guarantees to the bank that gives you the loan. And they say, well, if this person defaults on that loan, don't worry, we'll back you up. And so the bank then allows way more leverage on the loan than they normally would have because they have the government behind them saying, don't worry, you're going to be okay. And so the Small Business Administration goes to a bank and says, hey, give out a loan up to 90% of the value, right? And so that they only have to bring 10% to the deal because we're trying to get more people that are not wealthy to go out and use small businesses as a way of building wealth and building up the economy and building production, right? And so there's the SBA. The other way of doing it, obviously, is OPM or other people's money, right? And people do this in real estate. People also do this in businesses. And so there's a lot of investors out there right now, especially with what's going on in the markets and everywhere else, where they feel like they have a way better chance of making a return on their money and a much higher return in something like a small business acquisition or a small business deal than they would have throwing it into the S&P 500 or into some kind of ETF. And so there's a lot of investors out there that have a lot of cash. They would love to put it into something that returns them 30, 40, 50% year over year on their investment. And they know the owner. It's much more tangible to them. They can go and drive by that business instead of investing into a fund where they really have no control over how that money's used or anything else. They're just hoping and praying every year to get that return that they've been promised. And so the ways that most people do these deals, including myself, is you're going to do some mix of financing, some mix of investor capital, some mix of your own capital. But a lot of times, if you have a great deal, you can get a deal done with zero out of pocket. And that's pretty normal to do because there's such a demand from investors to get into this space.
So the first threshold that seems unattainable, I think a lot of people is just like, how am I going to go buy a business? So you kind of broke down the financing aspect of it super eloquently, by the way. I think a lot of people here have heard the acronym SBA before and didn't really understand kind of the backstory of that. So I think that really helped. The second threshold that I think a lot of people kind of have a hard time digesting is, how am I going to go find these deals? Like, am I going door to door? So it's like, how am I going to find these deals? And then if it's such a good deal, if it's going to make me money, then why is this person going to sell it to me? Like, can you marry those two concepts for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two ways in which we do sourcing for deals, off market and on market, just like real estate, right? So there's a lot of parallels here. So obviously, if you go off market, you're going to have the potential of getting a better deal, right? Because there's less people looking at it. And a lot of times that you're talking directly to an owner, not a broker, right? And so when you're talking about an on-market deal, that's where the owner of the business has gone to a business broker, said, hey, sell my business for me. They go out, they put it online, and there's probably 3 or 4 big websites out there. And they post it just like you would if you were selling your house. And then people reach out that are interested. And the broker kind of acts as kind of the gatekeeper between the seller and the buyer. On the off-market side, you are reaching out directly to the owners of those businesses. A lot of times they're not even in the mood to sell or never even thought about it. And when you send them an email or a cold call and they talk with you on the phone or look at your email and they say, hey, my name is Ben Kelly. I'm interested in buying your HVAC company. Here's my wife. Here's my 3 kids. Here's our 2 dogs. We're just normal people and we love this industry because of this reason, that reason, and this reason. And we're interested in seeing if you'd be willing to sell your business. And you send that out to 1,000 people. Well, guess what? You're going to have probably around a 7 to 10% response rate. And out of that 7 to 10% response rate, you're probably going to get about, for every 100 people, about 2 meetings that you send out to. So about 2%. And so you jump on those calls. You sell them on one. You're there to build rapport. You're not there to try to swing a deal. You're just there to get to know them. You're there to get to understand what their business is, if it's the right fit. And then if it is, you start the process of building that trust. You get an NDA signed. They start submitting some financial documents. You look at them, and then you put them right over to your bank to see if it's something that's financeable. And so it's not as easy as necessarily going to your local, Dairy Queen and saying, "Can I talk to the owner?" You can do that, but I would probably recommend actually reaching out in a more of a specialized strategy where you can get, you're sending out the same message to thousands of people. It's way more a better use of your time, and you'll actually get much more further reach doing it that way.
Interesting. So you really built a system to make your net as large as possible.
Correct.
A large net, but also a personalized net.
Yes. The key is being really personal in your outreach.
Right.
Because business owners get emails all the time. Right. I probably get 500 emails a day from random businesses. And so you want it to be targeted. You want to be seen as different. So you want to have a picture maybe of you and your family, right? They open it up and they see this generic looking, nice looking family. And they're like, okay, that's, I haven't got an email like this in a while.
I'm okay with them running my business for me.
Yeah, exactly.
I just have to say, like, of the first, 8 minutes that we've been on now, this might be the most like immediately engaging storyline I think we've had out of our 50 episodes or whatever it is now.
Oh, awesome.
Like, I think the concept of buying a business and having that cash flow for you is such a thought I know I've had a lot before, but I know a lot of my friends have thought about, but it just doesn't seem attainable. So I'm excited because you're quickly breaking down for our audience these concepts that just seem like a huge hurdle that are insurmountable, and you're breaking it down into little steps for us. So I really love that, and I think our audience is gonna love it.
Just to piggyback on that, yeah, I feel like you're really making it feel accessible. When it's something when we knew that we were going to have you on, and I was thinking about this, it didn't even seem accessible to me. So that's part of why we were so excited to have you come on and talk to you. And I love the zero money down piece because, again, that's like one of the biggest hurdles when you think about starting a business or buying a business. And, for me, I think, I've always just kind of, the default assumption is you are going to start a business, especially like if you're a newbie, like you think about starting a business, the thought of buying a business is kind of foreign. And one of the things, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about, we had a franchise expert on the podcast earlier this year. And when I think about buying businesses, I would kind of think more towards franchise. How do you think about the two? How would you contrast what you do with your business acquisitions to, someone considering a franchise as their approach to coming into the business?
Yeah, great question. And so I'm going to kind of break it down into two separate pathways, both including the franchise, right? So there's obviously starting a franchise from scratch, and there's acquiring a franchise. I'm very much more in the camp of acquiring an existing franchise, and I can go into some of the reasons why. Franchising is great because it does a couple things. One, you're having, usually, if it's a good franchise, and there are good franchises and bad franchises. There's a lot of franchises where I went in touch with a 10-foot pole, right? And then there's other ones where I'd be, jumping, doing backflips to try to get into. And so if the franchise one, you're looking for one that has a really good brand, right? You want one that has a brand that's associated with, if it's a food franchise or a service franchise, it's associated as being like when people think of food franchises, right? Chick-fil-A comes up to mind, right? Just great service, good food, and obviously it's a little bit different model with Chick-fil-A. It's not really a franchise model, but you want something that is going to do the hard work of getting the name recognition out of the way, right? So you want something that everyone already knows, so that the marketing aspect, which is the hardest thing for every business being started, right? Building a brand, building trust with your audience so that they come to you because they think that you are the best use of their money to do the service that they want you to do, right? And so if you have a good brand, that's already half the battle's done. So now you're already getting leads, or you're already getting customers coming in without even doing anything, just because you signed up under that franchise. So that's great. The other part is the back end operations. So good franchises have everything down to a science, whether it's onboarding their client, whether the servicing of their client, getting the reviews after their customer is after out the door and had got stuff done, following up with that same customer when they're offering additional services. And so the good franchises have the brand, and they also have the systems and processes. And so Now, let's look at like if we want to acquire an existing franchise or if we want to start one up. Now, starting one up, depending on the franchise, let's just say an average of $50K for the franchise fee, buying of the license to have a location. And then on top of that, you can get financing, but you're going to put down another, let's say, 50 to 100 grand on doing the build out or whatever it may be, right? Or you can then go, and there's a lot of franchises that are for sale. A lot of guys are retiring after spending 20, 30 years and want to sell their franchise. And actually, really quick, I can jump into, I'm actually buying a franchise right now of 7 locations. So I can tell you kind of a little bit on that. So you can buy an existing franchise and you're getting a team that's already in place, which right now in the current market, labor is one of the hardest things, right? So you're finding a team that's already trained. You're finding a team that already has a general manager that's running the day-to-day. It depends on the size of the franchise. Sometimes the owner's the one doing that. But in the case that I'm talking about, there's a GM. And they have existing customers, existing revenue, existing profit, right? So if you buy a company older than 5 years old and it's been profitable the last 5 years, you have a 93% success rate 5 years later with that same business, right? You're still at 93%. Now, take it from a startup, within the first 5 years, it's a 92% failure rate of every startup.
Right. I was going to say, it's like literally the inverse.
It is. And that's what people think like, oh, that's risky buying a business. I'm like, it's risky to start a business. Now, there's some businesses out there, and I actually just dropped, not to do a shout out, but on my YouTube channel, I just put out a video this past week called Buying a Business versus Starting a Business. And we go through the different, the pros and cons.
Shout out
right?
Ben Kelly YouTube.
Yeah, so you look at Ben Kelly one on YouTube. So, but the big thing is, if you're a person who is like a young person, you don't have many life experiences or skills or any management experience, starting a business might be the best way for you, right? You don't have low overhead. Maybe you don't have a family yet, and you think you know what you want to do, and you kind of want to start out. Starting a business that way makes a lot of sense. When you look to start a business, the thing that you do need is you need that experience, right? If you're going to have an investor or a bank come up behind you and give you millions of dollars to buy a business, they're going to want to be sure that you are capable of running this business, right? So you have to be able to point to a resume that shows I've done all these things, and this is why I'm the best bet to buy this company, right? And so if you don't have that, then yeah, the best thing for you is to prove that by starting something, getting some success, and then you can transfer it into actually buying a business. So I know that was a long-winded answer, Doug, but going back to the franchise, I'm right now looking at an oil change franchise, have it under contract at $5.5 million. And I'm doing it with a partner. And the way we're structuring the deal is it's going to be SBA with investor capital and very little from us to get this deal done. And we're going to be hopefully closing in the next 45 days on that deal. The reason why we picked that franchise is because 2 main reasons. One, has a great brand. The marketing and everything else that the HQ does is great. 2, the service that they do is recession resistant.
That's what I was going to say. The first thing I was like, man, buying a franchise right now, unless it's one of those recession resistant ones where like you have to do it, it's a mandatory, then it's like, yep. Oh man, it's kind of rough right now. But that's awesome.
Oh, totally. I would not. Yeah. Like right now, like one of the, like you guys probably heard of Crumble Cookie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's killing it. It's like one of the most hottest franchises in every location is profitable. I still wouldn't buy one just because it's something where it is very much a fad in my eyes. I think they're great cookies. Don't get me wrong. And I think that, they're going to do well. But if in a recession, would I rather have a Crumble Cookie, which you're paying like $5 for a cookie, or would I rather do an oil change franchise where has to change your oil in your car?
Yeah, where my car reminds me I have to do it every time I start it. Like which one of those? No car is telling me to go buy a cookie.
Exactly.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Exactly. And so that's the reason why I'm getting into it. But to your question, yes, franchise. I would buy an existing franchise if it was my choice.
Yeah. Well, thanks for kind of breaking that down, because I think when I asked the question, I was kind of looking at it as an either or mutually exclusive type thing. But even franchises could go up under what you're doing and what you're teaching your mentees to do.
Yeah, and shout out Leslie Cuban, episode 17. So yeah, Ben just gave a really good kind of macro view on it. Leslie's like her career is franchising, and she really kind of dove into some of those concepts you just covered. So definitely check that one out.
Yeah. So one of the things you said there too, Ben, was now when you go to get financing, whether it be SBA or otherwise, other people's money, you have this resume you can point to, and I've done this successfully for years, and probably now pretty simple and almost a no brainer for people to want to hand you money to invest in whatever business you're taking down. Going back before you had the resume, we'd like to kind of go all the way back and kind of show audience how you got here to where you are today. So we've had some guests that have served in the military, like yourself. You mentioned when you were getting out of the military, were you thinking, okay, now I'm going to transfer into being a civilian and focus on my career? Were you coming out of there thinking that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or were you just going to go into the corporate track at that time?
Oh, totally. No. Yeah. I was full on thinking that the path to happiness was getting hired by some corporate, Fortune 500 company and working my way up for the next 25, 30 years, building out a 401k and then having a couple million in there when I retire. Like that was the mindset I had. I was not an entrepreneur as a kid, or I wasn't the kid with the lemonade stand. I wasn't, the gumball machine kid. I was just, I worked hard, and I was, going into the military. I knew I wanted to do that, and I knew that I wasn't going to make it a 20-year career. My father actually was entrepreneurial later on as I was about to go to college, and had success in it. So I did have an example of it, but for me, it was like, I want to be like Jason Bourne type stuff, not actually go out there and actually build a boring business portfolio. And so it really happened probably after I was working for JP Morgan for a couple of years and just saw, okay, now I'm in a Fortune 500 company.
You're living the dream.
Doing the thing I said I wanted to do. Yeah, I'm living the dream. And I'm in a cubicle. I know, granted, I was a private banker, so I was getting paid pretty well. And
Right.
I was going out to dinners, fancy parties and things like that to meet clients. So there's nothing to complain about. Like it was a great gig, but I also realized, like, is this it? Right? Like I was like very much just kind of disappointed that this was the pinnacle of success. And this is what I still had to ask for time off. I still had to show up in a uniform, of these are the things that are acceptable to wear. And it's just more and more that I did, the more I realized, like, look, this is not what I want to be doing for the next 25, 30 years of my life. There has to be something else here. And so to your question, yes, absolutely. I was definitely feeling that.
As you laid that out, I was like getting goosebumps, reliving those moments of like, oh man, I only got a couple more days of vacation left for this year. And oh man, I got to, be in my cubicle for till 5 o'clock, even if, the work's all finished and I've done everything I'm supposed to do for the day. Oh man, I felt that deeply. So I think you had referenced, just touched on it briefly at the beginning, how you saw all these wealthy people come into the bank and you're like, oh, this person owns businesses. This person's buying these multi-million-dollar businesses. And was that what kind of set off the light bulb in your mind that, okay, this is the direction that I want to go and get out of this cubicle?
Yeah. So that was, I would say that's probably the biggest one. And then it was also a family friend of mine who's like one of my mentors. He owns like 33 McDonald's, back to franchising.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And he's a guy with like no college education, grew up, his father had one McDonald's location, right? So he kind of grew up in the business with his father and then took it from there and grew it to, 33 locations. Right now he's doing over 100 million a year in revenue. He's worth himself probably about $300 million. He's built it into other businesses, and just shown me through business ownership, what he's been able to do. And like I said, he didn't have the MBA that I had. He had none of that. He just saw something, saw a brand, saw a value, and just instead of going to college, he just focused on building. And he got to where he is today. And he's at a whole different level at this point. But he's a really good example to me. At the same time that I was at JP Morgan, seeing these other guys doing it, then seeing him, who I knew him as a family friend, like, oh wow, he just bought a private jet type thing, and I'm like, that's crazy, off of McDonald's, right? And so you're like, all right, so this guy's got something that he's doing something right that I'm not doing.
So did you sit him down and kind of start picking his brain, or how did that relationship actually provide some of the guidance that you were looking for and needing at that time?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's a formalized, like he's a family friend. Like we'll spend Christmases sometimes at his house and things like that. So he's a pretty close family friend. It wasn't like, can you formally mentor me? And this is something I think this is a good point to bring up for people out there that think that they don't have experience or I don't know any people that are wealthy to, one of the things I teach people is how to raise money for their first deal, right? If you're not someone like me at this point who's done multiple deals and has experience, like you mentioned, how do you go out there and get the first $100,000 check on a deal? And a lot of it, people don't realize just in their immediate network, how much capital there is, right? You might not know anyone who has a private jet, but you probably know through your network of people that could write a $50,000 check, right? Or someone who could write a $100,000 check. It doesn't take that much, uh, you know, uh, circles outside of your own personal one to hit that. And so I tell people is once you know this is something you want to do, tell people about it, right? And I'm not saying like you stay on the street corner and proselytize, but go out and when you go to church or when you're going to your play soccer or shoot some hoops down the street with some of your friends, just talk about it. When people say, "Hey, dude, what's going on? What are you up to recently?"
Yeah, normal
Hey, you know
conversation.
what? Yeah, I'm trying this one thing where I'm trying to buy a business. I'm trying to buy an HVAC company, and the reason why I want to do it is because of A, B, and C. I think it'd be a really cool way to build wealth. I promise you, they're going to ask questions, and they're going to be like, "Really? Well, why an HVAC company? How do you think do you have the money to do that?" Well, actually, you don't need that. There's a program called the SBA, and really, I can do a deal with this much capital, and the returns are pretty good. Like I've actually created an Excel model. I can send it to you if you want. Just look at it. It's pretty cool. And like I guarantee you, just by having those conversations over enough of a period of time, you're going to have like just in my immediate network, and I didn't come from wealth. I probably had 5 to 10 people just by talking for a couple months about what I was doing that wanted in. Right now, this only works if you're a trustworthy person, right? So if you're someone who has burned bridges in the past,
I'm out.
yeah, no. Yeah. If you burned some bridges in the past or you never paid people back, it might not work as well. But if you are a person who is honest, you're a person who's a hard worker, and you have treated people right in your life, I promise you that it is not that difficult. Once you start having those conversations, you're not asking for money. You're not going out there saying, hey, uncle, I need 100K. Can you give it to me to do this? No. You talk to every time you meet with your uncle over the course of a few months, he's talking to you like everyone does, and you talk about what you're doing. You talk about this idea constantly. He'll eventually ask you, "Hey, if I wanted to give 25 or 30K, could I do that?" And you're gonna be like, "Actually, yeah, you can." Right? And that's how you do it.
It's indirect
Very
asking.
indirect.
It's just I'm sharing opportunities. Yeah, I love that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it. And so when people follow that advice, it's not going to take a week. It's going to take 3 months, 4 months. And if you're diligent about it, and if you're not salesy about it, you're just talking about it as like, this is what I'm up to. I promise you, people are going to reach back out to you and say, "Hey man, remember that? I met you at our daughter's birthday party and you were talking about that deal, like that HVAC deal you're doing. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you're doing that?" I promise you, I had these conversations all the time, and people reach out because in their lives, they're looking for ways in which they can get a better return on their money.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
you are a conduit to that. And I think this is the same concept that I used to do some fundraising for a nonprofit, right? And many people are like, "Oh, that's gonna be so hard to ask people for money because it's not like they're getting a return, like a typical return on the money. They're investing in a cause, and the return is basically just the feeling that they've helped something they've wanted to help, right?" And for people that got into that, they had a hard time because like it's hard to ask someone for $100,000 when I'm not promising them anything in return. But I'm like, no, you got to think about it in the way of you are giving them an opportunity to use that $100,000 in a way that's going to give them satisfaction, right? Like you're providing the product that they're looking for, right?
Right.
And so the second you turn that mindset around, now you'll be able to raise that money with very little effort. You just take some time and it takes some diligence in putting it out there.
Ben, it's so easy to see why people would love to invest money with you and definitely trust you to show them returns on their investment. So going back through your looking back at your come up again. So you were at JP Morgan for a couple years, and then are we understanding correctly that you took another corporate position and kind of did the side hustle thing for a while?
Yeah. So I actually started my first acquisition while I was at JP Morgan. And so
Oh, okay.
I didn't leave JP Morgan until after I'd done, at that point, I think almost on my second acquisition. Um, so my first one was to start the software SaaS company in the fitness space, FitPro Tracker that you guys mentioned before. That was the first one. And it wasn't until, probably when I was getting ready to do my second at the time where I left JP Morgan. I did, like I mentioned before, I did some fundraising for a nonprofit. And so that was it was great. It was a very sweet gig because I got paid a full-time salary to do it, but it was only like a couple hours a week for me. Right. So I would have to travel once a month, go meet with high-end donors. But because I did that at the bank, that's why they kind of hired me to do this for this nonprofit. So I traveled once a month for a few days, but for the most part, I was only working a couple hours a week on actual, like on the phone or anything else like that. Everything else was email and everything else. So I had a lot of time to go and to work on this other deal. And so that's how I kind of got into it.
We have to circle back to that Fit Pro Tracker, Ben, the Hermosi story. I think it's so interesting how. So you were saying that you had this software and you were either looking to sell. Were you looking to sell it, or did he reach out to you because he saw it was a good software?
So we were looking for an investor to come on board originally.
Okay.
So we were looking to raise capital, and when we got in the conversation with, it was more I was interacting with Layla, who was like his acting COO at the time, and she, it was more of their interest was they wanted to build a proprietary software system because they had a business called Gym Launch, and so they were looking at us as a way of either white labeling it, or basically investing in us, but bringing us in house and then be exclusively for them, right? And so it just ended up like they were great to deal with. It just ended up where we were looking for something different to grow the platform out, and they were looking for something else, and they ended up creating their own software. So that's how that.
How cool of a full circle thing for both of you guys to kind of be early in your next step careers, kind of having that connection, and then now both of you are helping people grow and buy and find businesses, and just both of your trajectories are going nuts right now. I love how you have that circle from.
Well, his trajectory is much more than me, but yeah, he's on a different level.
Yeah, cut yourself a little slack here. You're just starting out, and I checked out your YouTube channel, so I think that that you're a little early on in the hockey stick growth here. But I think a lot of cool things happening here, and just hearing the really digestible education that you're giving the audience right now. I really think that these concepts are so hard for people to with imposter syndrome. It's hard for people to think I can do this. It's just, these concepts are out there, but I talk to people every week, other dads at my school or at soccer practice or whatever. And they're just like, man, I just don't like my job. I want to find something else. Like, I feel like I have good talent. I feel like people, like you were saying, like, I feel like the people I've worked with have like a lot of respect for me. I feel like I could go do something. I just don't know what to do. So what I love about having you on today, kind of similar to a couple of our other guests that we just had on, it's like you're giving these concepts that for a lot of us that feel like we had a good career, but we wanted to do something else, like how to take that first step to do it. So I wonder if you could kind of talk through, now that you've given us kind of a little bit of a pathway on how you did it. Can you talk directly to the audience that are currently in their corporate job? They're sitting at their cubicle in JP Morgan or at, working for these corporations. What should they be doing? I like that you said I worked on it as a side hustle at first to mitigate some of that risk. Can you talk to them about what steps should they be taking right now to get them on the path to seeing if this is something that could work out for them?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Jonathan. I think in order to start, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is your metric for success, or what is your metric for financial freedom, right? Everyone loves the idea of financial freedom, but it looks different for a lot of people. Some people have more of the fire, mentality where they're just going to reduce their expenses to like almost nothing and save as many dollars as they can and retire in 10 years. It's one way of doing it, right? The way that looking at my situation strategy, I was married, then started having kids. The strategy of the kind of the fire method of kind of reducing my expenses to nothing and saving as much as possible was something where it was going to cause, with with what I wanted to do, it was just going to cause more stress to go down that route than trying to go out there instead of recreating the wheel, instead of trying to come up with the next Facebook or Tesla or some other kind of idea. Go out there and look for things that were already tried and true and proven and jump on the train, right? And so that's where I came down with this is the best strategy for me. My skill set really is about in my life. There's a couple things that I excel at. There's a lot that I don't. And the difference between knowing the difference between those is success, right? Because I know exactly what I need to do in order to grow a business, because I've not only have I acquired a few businesses and grown them, but also know what I suck at. And I know that I need to find somebody who's really good at that. And all the success I've had in business has to come down to the team, has come down to the people that I put in place or the partner that I have. I know that my skills are much more on the front end. I'm much more on the communication side. I'm much more on building partnerships and building kind of the strategy, right? I'm more of the visionary in a sense. I'm not the guy in the trench doing the operational stuff. I'm not the guy who's building out the Excel sheets and the processes that are going to be most efficient to scale. That's just not me. And it's okay. So the first part that you need to do is you need to be in a spot where you know what your goal looks like, right? So if the goal is I want to work less than 10 hours a week, I want to make more than $250,000 a year, and I want to be able to be location independent and be able to travel with my family. Okay, that's the vision. Now, how do we reverse engineer that to be able to get that in the next 12 months, right? And then only a couple things can be possible to do that vision in 12 months, right? To get that cash flow in 12 months, it's very hard to build something from scratch to get that cash flow in 12 months. So look for things that already have that cash flow. So then we look at an existing business. Okay, we found one. It's making 400K cash flow. After debt service, you're going to be making 250K cash flow. Great. Now let's look at the existing team. Is the team going to be able to stay on and continue to operate at the level they are once you acquire it and the seller's gone? And there's probably going to have to be a few tweaks. You may have to hire somebody to fill a gap, but that is something that's very doable. And it was doable for me because of the skill sets that I had. And so you have to know what your vision is. You have to know the path to get there. And once you have the strategy and kind of to implement those things, then it's really about being diligent, knowing it's not going to happen in 2 days. It's not going to happen probably in 2 months. It's going to take time. But if you are consistent and you have that strategy in place, you will hit it. It might not be in 12 months. It might be 18 months. But guess what? 18 months later, you have 250K in cash flow a year, location independent, and you're managing your own time, right? So to everyone who's in that cubicle, you have the skill set. If you've been working in a cubicle for 5 to 10 years in corporate America, you have the skill sets to do it. I am not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the most talented guy in the room, right? All I did was look at guys in front of me doing it for years and years and years, and it finally got through my thick skull that this is something that I can do, right? And so I'm not Elon Musk or anyone else out there who's actually creating new things. I looked at something that's being done, and I'm like, okay, I think I can keep that running. And so that's what you're looking to do. So that's what I would say to someone who thinks they have to be someone special or they need a bunch of time. You can do this very much with 5 hours to 10 hours a week spending on the process, and you can get a deal done in 6 months. I've done it with myself and with now 150 people in my group doing it. So
that's what I was going to ask you next. Sort of, so similar to Mr. Passive, you started out doing it on your own, and now you really are providing a service through Twitter and now directly to people. Can you kind of talk us through? So people are reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, if our audience is sitting there and they're like, I love what Ben Kelly's saying right now. I feel like I can do this. Like, what next steps do I take?" So they're reaching out to you. Can you kind of talk through how that, is it a coaching business that you have? Is it a kind of a mentorship, or you put them into a program?
Yeah. So there's a platform called School, SKOOL. And so it's basically just a community-based platform. So what we have is kind of a private coaching community where everyone who pays, it's a one-time fee, you get in. And once you're in, you get off-market sourcing by my team. So we actually do the off-market sourcing for you for a certain period of time.
Yeah, that right there seems like one of the most difficult things, like finding the deals.
Correct. So off-market sourcing is hard. That's something that takes time and effort to build. Anyone can do it. It's not rocket science, but it just takes time and it takes effort to build the network to where you're able to get fast results, right? So
right.
nothing I do is super complicated. It's just things that I've tried over time and made pretty efficient. So we do the off-market sourcing, and then we have 2 calls weekly. Today's Monday. It's a Monday night at 8 p.m. and then Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And we do our group calls where everyone jumps on. We do tonight. It's going to be more of like a strategy education session on some kind of topic. Fridays is deal review. So people bring their deals, they throw it in front of me, and for an hour straight, I'm breaking down the deals, why it's good, why it's bad, should you do it, should you not do it, and answering questions that way. And so we have that. Then we have the forums inside the community where people are asking me questions, asking each other's questions. They DM me their deals. I'll do a Loom video breaking down why it's good, why it's bad, should they move forward, here's the next steps. And so it's basically just I hate to use the term mastermind because it gets used way too often, but it very much is a private coaching community where I am getting hands-on everyone's deals, giving them advice to push them forward to getting this deal done in the next 6 months. That's the goal. And we offer all the tools necessary to where you can make it happen. So that's what we're doing.
Wow. You really have laid out, how you do what you do. And I think you've made, buying businesses so much more accessible. One of the things that we always like to touch on and kind of hear from you a little bit is that difficult and challenging struggle that you had when you were first starting out. Can you take us to, what you would consider one of the most painful moments for you coming up when you were starting this business or getting the idea to want to get out here and start buying businesses?
Yeah, I've made a huge amount of mistakes over the last years, either from not doing enough due diligence on a deal. But I think the biggest one that the audience is going to be able to feel right away in their journey is not being taken seriously, right? And so even if you have your family members or friends that say they're going to invest in the deal, that's great. But now you got to convince the seller of the business that you're for real, and also the broker who's the gatekeeper that you're for real. And you're coming to buy a HVAC company, but you're not an HVAC guy, right? And how do you explain to them and how do you gain their trust to get through the gatekeeper to get to the seller, then convince the seller that you're the best person to buy? So when you're talking about small businesses, it's very personal, right? These people have built these businesses through their blood, sweat, and tears for 20, 30 years. Their employees are like their family. And so they're not just trying to sell to get money. Like, they want to sell to the right person because they know these people, and they're going to get calls 2 weeks after closing about how this jerk, you let this jerk buy the company and he's screwing everything up. And they know that, right? They don't want that to happen. And so the biggest thing I tell everybody is like, don't even worry about numbers of the business or getting into the details. Just build rapport, just build that relationship. Because
hearing you say that, it's just like, I was just having flashback when I started my hotel management company. I would just drive up and down the coast every day, trying to meet these hotel owners to trust me at the point I was a 27-year-old, 28-year-old. Trust me with your hotel. I can manage it better than all these other, big hotel management companies or these, 50-year-old men who have way more experience than me. It's just like hearing you say like how to get in the door, how to get through the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
It just seems like such a huge undertaking to be able to do these things. But really the way I learned how to do it was just, after my first year of literally failing every day, not getting to have a real conversation with any owner that was meaningful. Imagine 52 weeks of waking up and going and doing cold calls and not even getting a real lead. Like it was a brutal period. But hearing you say, it's like, yeah, but through that process, I learned so much about, how to build the relationship, what different angles to take. But it took me like a year to take the blinders off of how doing it the way I was doing was not working. So I love how you were kind of talking about, these are the concepts that we started Find Your Freedom for. All the landmines that we jumped on in the first year or two of our businesses. Now we're having these experts come on and teach our audience, like, yeah, don't be dumb like Jonathan in the first year, continuing to try over and over the same way. If that's not working, go talk to another person, or just don't even talk to them about the business. Just go build the relationship. Like, I think that piece of advice is such an important piece. Relationship first, business talk later. Like, they want to get to know you and make sure you're a chill dude. Once they know you're a chill dude, then you can open up the door about, maybe like whatever else can be down the path. I think that's critical.
Yeah, exactly what you said, Jonathan. I think that people don't realize how powerful it is to go into whether you want to find a mentor or you want to get a job or you want to get a customer, going and offering something of value for free and build it and just purely for relationship's sake is going to do so much wonders for your business in growing your network and your customer base. If you go up to a customer like, hey, dude, there's a guy on YouTube that does this, or on maybe on Instagram, I can't remember which one, but he goes and he just mows people's yards for, like, you probably seen it, right? Their yards are trash. And he comes up to him and says, hey, I'm going to fix this, make it look beautiful and everything else. And then he's like, no cost. I just want to film it. And they're like, sure. Right. And he goes and he mows it. And now he's making money on the back end from growing his everything else. But the point is, imagine going to a neighborhood and doing that for a couple clients, right? You took an afternoon and you do a couple of people's lawns for free. And then you give them a card and say, hey, if you ever thought you needed help, let me know. How much he's getting customers, right? They're going to be like, holy crap, that guy is not only did he do a great job, which is important, but that guy just literally worked for an hour on my lawn for free. And he did it because he wanted to show that he is capable of it. Doing something like that is a great way to build your business, especially from the beginning, to build it up. And I think that when you're looking at to get through the door, going in there and giving value first is always the best way to separate yourself from the legions of other, cold email, cold call guys that are just like throwing offers at you all day long. So 100%.
Find a creative way to build some value first. I love that. Yeah, our previous guest, Grant Finlay, had a similar story where he's like, I have this awesome software. I know that everyone's going to love it. I'm giving it away for free and no one fucking wants it. So what should I do here? And then his wife was like, oh, why don't you just like interview a couple of the real estate people, do like a little spotlight on them. So he went out to a friend and said, hey, do you want me to spotlight you and put you on the software? And the guy's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. I love to talk about my business. And then he went to a stranger and, hey, do you want me to interview you about the thing? He just provided a little bit of value and all of a sudden everyone was interested in the exact same thing, but he was providing them a little bit of value. And now all of a sudden the floodgates opened and it just became a huge business for him. So I think that piece of advice is applicable no matter what industry or vertical you're trying to get an opening in. You really just got to be creative, and you might have to try a few different pieces of value. It might not be mowing lawns, but there's so many different ways that you can help people do these things. So I think that's super, super valuable. One of the questions that we ask every entrepreneur on the pod is, how would you define entrepreneurship? It's such a personal thing, but how would you personally define it?
That's a good question. I think it really comes down to it. Again, most valuable thing in life to me is not money, it's time. It's the only resource that's finite, right? And so for me, I define entrepreneurship in a way of maximizing the return and at the same time of maximizing time, right? So you're like, right now, if I wanted to sell my time, I could make a lot more money. But since that's my most valuable resource, it reverses the equation for me, right? What can I do to where I'm spending the least amount of time, right? But it's giving me the best return. And so I think for entrepreneurship, to me, is people who are able to take that equation and get the best result. The people I respect the most is not the guy working 150 hours a week, making $2 million a year. It's the guys who are working 5 hours a week, making $2 million a year.
Right.
That is where I'm like, that guy has got it, right? He was able to maximize his finite resource in the best way, most efficient way possible. So when entrepreneurship to me is like optimizing that. If you can optimize that, then that is the key on that.
All right, Ben, was there one piece of advice you've received in your career that you think, wow, that was so impactful, that's going to stay with me forever?
Yeah. Probably the biggest piece of advice I got was focusing more on people than focusing on the cash flow or the profit margin. And so for me, again, if my most value that I see in life is my time, the only way I'm going to be able to maximize that is by having someone else do the work in a very high quality amount. And so how do I find the people, train them up, incentivize them to do really well so that I'm maximizing my time and maximizing my profit on the time that I am giving, right? So for me, it's focusing on people first And even if that means you have to overpay or you have to like put out to get some really good rock stars on your team, it's going to be way worth it than trying to nickel and dime and getting the lowest bidder coming onto your team. So that's probably the biggest piece of advice.
That's an excellent point. It's all about the people. I read this book earlier this year called Who Not How, and it kind of says the same thing over and over and over again throughout the book, but the message is so critical, which is it's all about the who, because we get caught up so often saying, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? But it's really, who do I need to bring in to help me accomplish this vision and goal? So speaking of vision and goals, what do you see for yourself, Ben Kelly, in the next 5 years? You said you want to come in to lay the vision out first, and then you can reverse engineer. So what does that vision look like for Ben Kelly over the next 5-10 years?
Yeah. So the goal is to get to $1 million in cash flow from the business, which on track to hit in the next short while. So that's get to $1 million in cash flow, and then but also at that point be working less than 20 hours a week to do that. And so that's kind of my I should say my 25-yard goal right there. Once I get past that, then I'll make a new one to where, because it's not like I don't see myself just stopping and be like, all right, I'm done, and I'm just going to sit around and
kick the feet up and
yeah, exactly, put my feet up and just kind of watch Netflix all day. It's gonna, for me, I enjoy the chase, the challenge, and but I also know that like I got young kids right now. And as I get older, I want to be more and more just available for being a part of everything that they're doing. And so I want to make sure that I'm maintaining that as time being my most precious commodity in the space.
100%. Jonathan and I are completely with you on that one, with watching the kids grow up and being involved in their lives, because we'll never get these times back. Now, what parting advice do we have, Ben? We're going to wrap this thing up, and we just want to see if you have one last little tip or thought that you'd like to share with our audience of aspiring entrepreneurs who are looking to come out and become successful entrepreneurs one day.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was thinking about that in preparation for this. I think that there's a lot of people, and this was myself not too long ago. A lot of people, they look at this as something that they want. They want to be financially independent. They want to have more time with their family. They want to be able to go and take a month off and go somewhere and be able to do that. But they feel like either they don't have the skill sets, they feel like they don't have the money, they feel like there's a million different excuses why not to do it. And I want people to understand, like, if you want extraordinary results, you have to have extraordinary actions, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense, right? Why would something be extraordinary if it was very easy and ordinary to do? And so if you want to have that extraordinary result, come up with it doesn't mean that you have to be a genius or anything else, but let's say the result is I want to be financially independent, making $200,000 a year, cash flow, and be in charge of my own time and effort. But then look at the actions that need to be put in place to achieve that, and just be dogged in going after it, right? Don't let people tell you, oh, you're stupid, or, hey, that's so risky. That's so risky buying a business and becoming becoming a business owner. Like, it's less risky to work for a Fortune 500 company and they have to do layoffs this year, and you're one of the 100,000 people laid off. Like,
right.
Like, which one is more risky, right? You have no control in one situation, and the other one you actually have control. And so it's just a mentality and a mindset that people need to break free. And if you want to achieve that extraordinary result, you got to take extraordinary action. Do something that makes you uncomfortable. Try to do it daily. Doesn't mean in business, but just in life. Try to do something that's flexing that muscle every day. And then when you step out there and you do something like acquiring a business, you're going to realize that it was one is way more attainable than you thought. And once you've done it once, you can do it again. And that's going to be the first step of many to achieving that generational wealth you're looking for.
I love that. And in hearing you talk about it also, I was just thinking more macro on, in the market right now, we were talking about like, when's a good time to buy the businesses and recession, proof. I was just thinking, with interest rates staying higher for longer, now is kind of a tough time in the market, for businesses. And now is actually probably a decent spot to be buying businesses, because like, yeah, we've been down now for, a year or so. So you can kind of see how they are along this, this bottom period. And, it's probably not going to be great for another year or so, potentially. But then you can see, like, once the market does start getting back, and once the consumer does start spending, again, there's some upside to it. You're not buying at the top. You're in a decent spot here. Do you kind of look at
Totally.
the businesses that way? Do you think about the market?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously interest rates play a big role. Right now, it's the interest rate on your SBA loan is going to be around 11%. A year and a half ago, it was at 6%. Right. So it definitely does a big difference when it comes to what you're paying out in terms of cash flow. But at the end of the day, when rates rise, prices fall. Right. So so now you're going to look at that same business that was selling for 1.5 million. Now that's selling for $1 million. Right. And so it's all relative. And you can find great deals like seller financing. You can do that. You don't even have to get a bank debt, and you can make way better terms when you do seller financing. And so it just takes people the willingness to learn, to try, be okay with making mistakes, bumping your head against a wall like I did. And if I hadn't gone through those trials and tribulations and everything else and getting to I would not even be close to where I am today. Right? I've learned so many lessons along the way, and it also makes, I think, me being able to teach others how to do it, what to avoid, because I went through it myself, right? And so I think that's key.
That's awesome, Ben. We all have such different paths to finding our freedom. So I just want to be sure to thank you again for sharing your story with us. I think this is one that'll really resonate with the audience. And I already have a couple of people that I'm thinking about shooting off an email to say, hey, you got to talk to this guy, Ben. I think he has some really cool things. And that's the way it kind of works, right? It's just like, talk to different people just to learn a little bit more. Like, maybe you're not the exact right person, or maybe you are, but talking to people who can teach you and show you behind the curtain on new ideas. And it's like, oh, you know what, maybe my skill set does work for this, or, maybe it doesn't. But I think, like you said, putting yourself in a position to learn something, do something hard every day is such a critical piece. That's one of the reasons that we started this podcast, because we're not really podcast guys, but we're like, this can be a really beneficial thing. It's not really easy for us, but let's go get out there and do it, and let's meet some really freaking cool people. And here we are. So thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm really glad meeting people like you are like what reiterate why this was worthwhile for us to put in the time to make this part of our lives.
Oh man, I really appreciate that, Jonathan. Doug, both of you guys, it's been awesome to talk with you, and you guys ask great questions, getting to the heart of the matter. And I think that it doesn't. You guys continue doing this, it's only going to get you're going to get a lot of personal satisfaction from it, but you're also going to grow, and you're also going to have a lot of other opportunities that kind of present themselves to you. But I appreciate you guys taking this last hour or whatever it's been, kind of going through my story and what we're doing. And if anyone wants to learn more, then they can reach out, and I have no problem just doing a free call, just talking with them, let them know exactly how to do that. So.
Yeah, please. Give people are going to want to reach out to you. Where should we send them? We'll put it all in our show notes. But where should we send them to?
Yeah, so if they want to get directly out to me, I would say ben@benkelly.co is my email, and so just send me an email. That if you want to go with social media, @benkelly1, and 1 is spelled out ONE, on Twitter or Instagram. I just get a lot of DMs, and so you might get lost in there. But if you want to get a hold of me, reach out at ben@benkelly.co, and I'll get back to your email on that.
Ben, this was so awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time, brother.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate you.
Being an entrepreneur is hard. That is why we created findyourfreedompod.com to compile all the resources you need to find your own freedom.